Hey people, it's Nias talking. Now, I want to thank the Instagram account, I think it was OmaYuroba73 that I found this story on. And so that's where, and again, I will say that if you look on the right accounts on Instagram, you can find a lot of information for further research. And I found this article on Face to Face Africa. The story of Takyi, Takyi, Takye, not Takyi, the Ghanaian king who led a slave rebellion in Jamaica in 1760. Before finding himself as a slave, working hours on end, living in hard conditions on the frontier plantation Jamaica, Takyi was a Fanti king from Gold Coast, now modern Ghana. There are no records of which group of Fantis he ruled over before becoming a slave. Research indicates that he might have been the ruler of a settlement in Komenda or Koramantse in the central region of Ghana. Takyi was also a wealthy merchant and slave trader himself until he was captured during the Komenda Wars and sold off into slavery when his state was defeated. In 1759, actually, let me just go back to that. Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, he was a slave trader, he was a traitor, he was a coon, he got what he deserved. But I want people to understand African slavery was very different. Like, it wasn't permanent. People might be captured in wars, they might be employed for about maybe 7 to 10 years and then maybe become free or become part of the tribe which had defeated them in some ways. But it wasn't permanent, and it wasn't like, oh, your children would become enslaved or that they had the complete power of life or death over you. So when people say he sold them, that isn't, he didn't quite understand what would happen, because remember, he only sold them and he never knew anything after that. He didn't know what would happen in America or Brazil or Jamaica or any other place. So please, let's not use as ammunition to spread false stories. Anyway, let's keep going. In 1759, after years of toiling and suffering on the plantations, Takyi and his allies, Yo, Sabuda, and Kwarteng, who are also of Ghanaian descent, escaped into a cave far beyond their plantations to plan a rebellion. They escaped during the day when everyone was occupied with work, or at night and returning before daybreak. With full support from Queen Nanny, Takyi's plan was to defeat the British and all slave masters and create Jamaica as a separate and independent black colony. Known as Takyi's War the 1760-80 Easter Rebellion of Port Maria, the rebellion took place a year later to become the second largest and most shocking rebellion 30 years after Brefu led the Aquamoos in the 1733 St. John slave insurrection. The massive Aquamoo revolt is considered one of the longest-lasting rebellion recorded in the history of the Americas. Now you see, one of the things that they like to give in history is they say, well, we were so benevolent that we saw the evils of slavery, especially one of the things you learn in British history. They talk about William Wilberforce and how benevolent they were and how they just became more moral and they ended slavery. They don't mention these constant slave rebellions where people just took to the field and kept fighting over and over. Okay? Now please remember that. And don't forget the gullahs in the United States. They don't like to talk about that. Anyway, in May of 1760, Takyi and his followers started a revolt. In the early hours of the morning, starting at the plantation where they worked, killing the owners and thus freeing all the slaves. The former slaves joined in the revolt immediately, and a few ran off to spread the word of the revolt on other plantations. With a good number of followers, they quickly made their way to Fort Haldane, where Takyi killed the storekeeper and instructed his men to pick up all the machines and gunpowder they could get. According to oral history, Takyi and his slaves were strengthened and protected by the Obeah spiritual leaders who had been labeled by witch doctors by the Westerners in Jamaica. The British commanded the Maroons and their local army to fight Takyi and his men, as well as kill any Obeah leader. And look at this now. Do you see how they use other blacks to fight other blacks and keep control over the whole of them? Nothing has changed in over 250 years. Just like the militias in Africa who are employed by, Western corporations to go and fight against another group and then install a dictator. Anyway, the killing of an Obeah leader angered Takyi and his men, who now had a strong army with close to 80 different groups and taken control of a greater part of the land. Consequently, they killed several more plantation owners of white people before retreating into the bush to fight the Maroons sent by the white officials to stop the rebellion. The rebellion lasted until July, when Takyi was gunned down and killed. After he was shot, his head was cut and displayed in the center of the town to indicate that the rebellion had stopped and the freed slaves and Takyi's armor were now in danger. Despite his death, Takyi's military fought on, hoping to realize his dream. Many slaves committed suicide to avoid capture, and others were recaptured and sold off to different masters. By the end of July 1760, the British had reinforced order and conducted a mass unmarked burial for all the slaves killed during the war. A waterfall close to the cave where Takyi and his men planned the revolt was named Takyi Falls and is currently open to visitors. A school has been named after the great enslaved Ghanaian chief who led the rebellion. So I want to say a few things. First off, we always see that racist meme, we was kings. Well, yes, there were black people brought to America who were kings, who were of nobility, and who had great lineage. Takyi is one of them. And people often say, well, when they said that racist meme, they only refers to the Egyptians. There were great kings and queens throughout Africa. Anyway, and I want to view this, as I mentioned earlier about people saying that Takyi got what he deserved. Again, African slavery was a very different thing to American or Spanish slavery, where it went on for generations. The person had complete life or death over them, and the person was owned for life. Like I said, African slavery was very different. And I view his story as one of redemption, a person who makes a mistake and has a calamity who befalls on him and ends up redeeming himself. And you have to understand, he didn't just escape and run away. He could have done that and just gone to the Maroons and then went for refuge. He said, I will not rest until everyone is free. So this is a man who put his life on the line for his people. This is truly a king, not someone who enjoys the power and the prestige, but someone who puts his life on the line for his people. So truly, he is a patriot, and one worthy of being recognized as an ancestor. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. And if you want to donate to the channel, leave the GoFundMe in the description. And make sure to always do your own research and keep learning. Peace, family.